There's a sacred kind of strength that rises when nobody's watching, a quiet fire that doesn't need applause to burn. You see, we live in a world that celebrates noise, where progress is posted and every small win is broadcasted. But I came to speak to the ones who are building in silence, the ones laying bricks with trembling hands and tear-stained eyes, trusting God in the shadows. This ain't about the spotlight. It's about the surrender, the unseen grind, the prayers whispered in the dark when the vision feels too big and you feel too small. I need you to know that heaven sees what Instagram doesn't, and what you're building brick by quiet brick is holy. So tonight we're going to talk about how to build yourself in private, how to grow in grace, and how to become everything God called you to be, even if no one's clapping yet. There's something sacred about moving in silence, and I'm not talking about silence that comes from fear or silence has been forced upon you by shame or rejection. I'm talking about the intentional kind, the kind of silence that's strategic, the kind that says, I don't need to announce what I'm building because I'm too busy building it. See? We often mistake quiet seasons as wasted seasons, but in the kingdom, silence is a signal. It means something is happening. Heaven does some of its best work in the dark. You ever notice how seeds grow underground, how the roots form before the leaves ever see the sun? That's not stagnation, that's foundation. God will often hide you before he reveals you, because exposure without preparation is dangerous. Some of us are so desperate to be seen, to be known, to be validated, that we step into spaces our character wasn't built to sustain. We let people into dreams that were still in incubation. And when they didn't clap or didn't understand, we started questioning if we were even called. But the truth is, some things are too holy for public consumption. Some seasons require a kind of silence that isn't empty, it's expected. It's that Mary kind of silence. When the angel told her she was carrying something divine, she didn't run and post it. She didn't look for likes, comments, or confirmation. She pondered it in her heart. That's what strategy looks like. That's what trust looks like. It's knowing you're pregnant with purpose and being okay with nobody seeing the bump yet. We confuse noise with progress. We think if people aren't noticing, we must not be moving. But the most powerful moves are the quiet ones. The decisions you make when no one's watching, the prayers you whisper that nobody hears, the therapy sessions, the journaling, the lonely nights when you're choosing to stay instead of run, heal instead of hide. That's strategy. That's growth. That's God getting your roots deep enough so when the wind comes, you don't break. Let me tell you something. Elevation without process will always lead to collapse. The quiet season is where your backbone gets built, where your faith becomes more than a feeling, where you learn to discern God's voice above your own. That silence isn't punishment, it's positioning. You're not being ignored, you're being insulated. God is protecting you from distractions, detours, and even from your own impulses. Because let's be honest, we don't always know what's best for us. We get impatient. We want the platform, but we don't want the pruning. We want to speak before we've learned how to listen. But silence teaches you patience. It teaches you wisdom. It trains you to be faithful with little so you can be trusted with much. That's strategy. Some of the greatest warriors don't announce their next move. They prepare in secret. They train in silence. They know that their power is not in the noise, but in the discipline. They don't need to prove anything. They just stay ready. And that's what this season might be doing for you. It's not punishment. It's preparation. It's God fine-tuning your vision, checking your motives, healing your wounds, and strengthening your identity so that when the doors open, you don't walk in as a fractured version of yourself. See, when you confuse stagnation with strategy, you'll start rushing what God is refining. You'll try to open doors he meant to keep shut. You'll try to push fruit from a tree he's still rooting. You'll think because it's quiet, he must have forgotten you. But I came to tell you God is still speaking in the silence. It may not be loud. It may not be glamorous. But if you lean in, you'll realize that he's teaching you how to move with intention, how to walk with authority, and how to stand firm when the ground shakes. Because when it's time, when the strategy becomes revelation and the silence breaks, it won't be because you pushed your way in. It'll be because God ushered you in. And you'll be ready, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you were faithful in the quiet, because you obeyed when it didn't make sense, because you trusted the strategy even when your flesh wanted to be seen. That's the kind of quiet power God builds in secret. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't need recognition. It just needs obedience. So don't despise this silent season. Don't rush through it. Don't let the world's pace push you out of God's process. What you call stillness, God might be calling strategy. What you think is a pause, he might be using as preparation. And when it's time, when the silence breaks, you'll know it wasn't wasted. It was working. We live in a world that glorifies the outcome but rarely honors the process. Everybody wants to shine, but nobody wants to dig. We see the success, the stage, the spotlight, but we don't see the story behind it. We don't see the years in the wilderness, the prayers prayed behind closed doors, the nights spent wondering, God, when will it be my time? But if you ask anyone who's standing in a place of promise, they'll tell you they were developed in private long before they were celebrated in public. There's a weight that comes with being seen. There's a responsibility that comes with influence. And if you haven't grown deep enough in the dark, the light will expose your roots or the lack of them. That's why God is less concerned with when you arrive and more concerned with who you're becoming while you wait. He's working on your heart before he promotes your name. He's fine-tuning your spirit before he puts you on display. Because public glory without private growth is dangerous. It'll have you performing instead of being. It'll have you collapsing under pressure because you didn't have the character to carry what you prayed for. We want the crown, but not the crushing. We want the platform, but not the pruning. But you can't skip the middle. You can't microwave maturity. Growth takes time. It takes discipline. It takes humility. And the truth is, nobody claps for the growing. Nobody celebrates the healing. Nobody posts the moments where you chose forgiveness over bitterness, obedience over comfort, self-restraint over attention. But that's where the real victory is. That's where your roots stretch. That's where your spiritual muscles are built. And it's all happening behind the scenes. God will often take you through seasons where nobody's calling your name, not because you're not valuable, but because he's teaching you to find your value in him. He'll shut every door you tried to force open, not because he doesn't want you there, but because you're not ready yet. Because what's worse than waiting is arriving too early and realizing you weren't built for it. And so he hides you. He shields you. He trains you in the shadows because he knows that when you grow in private, you won't be shaken when you're seen in public. This world will tempt you to show your fruit before it's ripe. It'll convince you that if you're not posting, you're not progressing. That if they're not cheering, you're not chosen. But don't be fooled. God does his best work in secret places. In the hidden spaces of your heart, in the quiet decisions nobody sees. He's trying to impress people. He's trying to prepare you so that when the light hits you, it doesn't reveal your wounds, it reflects his glory. And that's the thing about real growth. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's sacred. It happens when you're reading the word and your heart convicts you, when you choose accountability over secrecy, when you take your hands off the outcome and say, God, have your way, even if it means hiding me a little longer. That's what builds endurance. That's what produces fruit that lasts. That's the kind of growth that can't be shaken by opinions or undone by pressure. We think we're ready because we have the talent. But talent without transformation is dangerous. What good is a gift if your character can't carry it? What good is influence if your identity is still fragile? God is not interested in giving you a platform that becomes your prison. That's why he grows you in private. So when the doors do open, you walk through them whole. You walk through them. You walk through them free from the need to be validated because you've already been validated by the one who called you. That kind of freedom doesn't come from applause. It comes from process, from the seasons where God stripped everything that wasn't like him, the relationships, the habits, the crutches, the idols, and it hurt, but it healed. It broke you, but it built you. Because you started realizing that the real glory isn't in being seen. It's in being transformed, in becoming who you were always meant to be, and let's be honest, it's in those quiet seasons where you really meet yourself, where you see the parts of you that still need healing, where God confronts the areas you've been avoiding, the anger you've been hiding, the insecurity you've been masking, the trauma you've been burying. He doesn't shame you. He reshapes you. He teaches you how to trust him, not just with the promise, but with the process, with the in-between, with the moments that feel like nothing's happening, but everything's shifting. Because even when you don't see it, growth is happening. Every time you choose purpose over pride, growth is happening. Every time you say no to distractions and yes to destiny, growth is happening. Every time you decide to keep showing up, keep believing, keep praying, even when it feels like nothing's changing, growth is happening. And one day, what was growing in secret will bloom in public, but not because you forced it, because God said, now you're ready. That moment won't be about proving anything to people. It'll be about proving God's faithfulness through your life. And you'll realize the glory isn't about the stage or the spotlight. It's about the story, about how you survived what was meant to break you, about how you stayed faithful when it would have been easier to walk away, about how you trusted him in the shadows. And now you don't just have fruit, because private growth isn't glamorous. It's gritty, it's real, it's full of moments where you question everything, but still choose to believe. It's built on obedience, not opportunity, on submission, not striving. And that kind of growth, that's the kind God breathes on. That's the kind he rewards, not because you earned it, but because you let him shape it. And now when the doors open, when the light hits, when the glory comes, you'll know you didn't skip the process. You led him. There is something powerful about a person who chooses discipline when they could chase display. It's easy to want to show up polished. It's tempting to want to perform progress instead of actually doing the work. But what God is calling you to build in this season requires more than a curated image. It requires character. It requires consistency. It requires a kind of discipline that says, I'm not just trying to look right. Because when God gives you something worth carrying, you can't afford to live for applause. You've got to be anchored in discipline. Discipline says, I'll pray even when I don't feel like it. I'll study even when no one's watching. I'll walk in purpose when it's not trending. Display will have you chasing moments, but discipline will keep you in alignment with your mission. And if you're going to build yourself quietly, you've got to choose the path that doesn't always feel good, but always produces fruit. You've got to be okay with not being seen if it means being secure. You've got to fall in love with the process, not just the praise. Because the enemy doesn't care about how good you look if he knows your foundation is weak. He'll let you have a spotlight if he knows the cracks will show under pressure, but discipline closes those cracks. Discipline makes you unshakable, not because life stops shaking, but because you've trained yourself to respond instead of react, because you've learned how to rule your spirit when everything around you is chaotic. That's not a display, that's divine strength. You don't build legacy off display, you build it off discipline. Off the choice to wake up and do the hard thing again, off the decision to steward what you've been given, even when it doesn't look like much, off the ability to say no to good so you can say yes to God. That's not always pretty. It won't always make sense to people, but discipline never needed a cheer section. Discipline is between you and God. It's in the early mornings and late nights. It's in the mundane. It's in the boundaries you set and the habits you create and the standards you refuse to lower. That's the difference between those who look the part and those who live the purpose. Display can get you noticed. Discipline is what keeps you sustained. And too many of us are burning out trying to maintain an image we weren't disciplined enough to grow into. We're exhausted from performing, drained from pretending, tired from trying to impress people who still don't see us. But discipline doesn't need a stage. Discipline knows God sees, and when God sees, strength increases. When God sees, he entrusts you with more because he knows your character won't sabotage your calling. Some of us are frustrated in our current season, not because God has forgotten us, but because we haven't learned to value what's developing in us. We want elevation, but we don't want endurance. We want visibility, but we don't want the vulnerability of being held accountable when no one's watching. But if you can be faithful in the quiet, you won't be trustworthy in the spotlight. That's why God calls you into discipline, because he's trying to make you ready for the weight of your calling, ready for the warfare that comes with influence, ready for the assignment that's bigger than your comfort zone. Discipline is what prepares you when opportunity knocks. It's what sharpens your voice, strengthens your walk, and deepens your faith. Display can't do that. Display can distract you, deceive you, detour you. It can make you believe you've arrived when you've only just begun. It can make you addicted to validation, to affirmation, to attention. But discipline sets you free. It anchors your identity in something deeper than light. It teaches you how to show up full even when no one's clapping. It teaches you how to keep going when it's not glamorous. There's a reason Jesus didn't spend his ministry trying to impress. He moved with authority because he had intimacy with the Father. He didn't need to display his power for people to validate it. He walked in it because he had disciplined himself in prayer and solitude and obedience. And if Jesus needed discipline to fulfill his purpose, what makes us think we can skip that part and still be fruitful? There's no shortcut to the oil. You've got to be pressed. You've got to be consistent. You've got to keep showing up in the silence, in the resistance, in the stretch. Discipline doesn't feel good in the moment. It costs you. It costs you comfort. It costs you convenience. It costs you fitting in. But the return is always greater than the sacrifice. You get clarity. You get conviction. You get capacity. The more disciplined you become, the less space you give to distractions, the less tempted you are to settle, the less willing you are to compromise. And that's what maturity looks like. It's not perfection. It's pursuit. Pursuing the version of yourself that God saw when he called you. Pursuing purpose even when the path is narrow. Pursuing growth even when it's slow. Discipline will have you walking away from what looks good because you know it's not God. It will have you protecting your peace like it's sacred. It will have you in your word when everybody else is in their feelings. It will have you moving in silence, not because you're afraid, but because you're focused. It will have you turning down opportunities that aren't aligned, even if they come with a paycheck or a platform, because you know you're not building for the moment, you're building for the mantle. And that mantle requires integrity, it requires wisdom, it requires the kind of self-control that only comes through discipline, because when God elevates you, everything connected to you gets elevated too. The weight doesn't just increase, it multiplies. And if you haven't built the strength privately, you'll crumble publicly. But if you've chosen discipline over display, if you've submitted your life to the process, if you've surrendered your ego to his voice, you won't just carry the weight, you'll steward it. This is the season where God is calling some of us back to the basics. back to the private place, back to discipline, not because he wants to restrict you, but because he wants to release you. He's breaking you free from the cycle of performance, from the addiction to appearance, from the fear of being unseen, because real power doesn't need an audience, doesn't need a filter, it doesn't need a show. Real power comes from being rooted, from being disciplined, from being submitted to the slow, steady work of God behind the scenes. There's a kind of peace that comes when you stop living for the crowd and start living for the King, a kind of security that sets in when you realize not everybody needs to understand your journey. Not everybody needs to approve it. Not everybody is qualified to witness what God is doing in you. Because before the world ever applauds your growth, God already proved your beginning. He's not just watching your outcomes. He's been watching your obedience. And in the silence, in the struggle, in the sacred place of surrender, he's been your witness. Sometimes God will close every door not to punish you, but to position you where his voice is the only one you can hear, because when too many people have access to your process, their opinions can drown out your discernment. They start projecting fear onto your faith. They start interpreting your calling through the lens of their comfort. And God says, I need to pull you away. I need to separate you so you remember who's writing your story. Because if you let the world become your witness too soon, you'll start performing instead of progressing. You'll start chasing applause instead of alignment. You'll let the noise convince you you're not moving because they're not clapping. But God's not looking for a performance. He's looking for presence. He's looking for sons and daughters who can say, even if nobody sees me, God, you see me. Even if no one understands this season, I know you ordain it. Even if I'm walking this thing out alone, I trust that you are bearing witness to every single step. And that kind of confidence doesn't come from platforms. It comes from prayer, from presence, from pain even. It comes from choosing to believe that God is enough, even when people are not. We spend so much time trying to prove ourselves to people who were never called to validate us. But when God is your witness, you stop performing for people who don't have the power to promote you. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop comparing your pace to someone else's. Because when God is watching, when God is keeping the record, when God is overseeing your preparation, you know you can trust his timing. You know you don't need to rush into visibility when he's still developing your vision. You don't need to go viral when he's still rooting you. And some of us are frustrated because we feel unseen. We feel overlooked. But what if you're not overlooked? You're just being overseen by heaven. What if God is doing something so intentional, so holy, so tailor-made in your spirit that it had to be done in private? Because if people saw it too soon, they would distort it. If people heard about it too early, they would discourage it. If people touched it too fast, they would taint it. So God says, let me be your witness. Let me be the one who sees it, covers it, grows it until it's ready to be revealed. That's what makes the unveiling powerful. It's not just that people see it. It's that you know God already did. That while you were weeping, he was working. While you were doubting, he was developing. While you were quiet, he was keeping score of every yes, every surrender, every battle you didn't talk about but still showed up for. God saw it. God marked it. God affirmed it. And when the time comes, the world won't be seeing you for the first time. They'll just be catching up to what heaven already knew. And that's why you don't need to beg for attention. You don't need to campaign for support. You don't need to compromise your integrity just to get noticed. Because the one who called you will confirm you. The one who anointed you will announce you. The one who gave you the vision will make it visible when it's time. But until then, your job is to be faithful. Your job is to be focused. Your job is to trust that when God is your witness, nothing you've done in obedience is ever wasted.
There's a beauty in being hidden by God, because when he hides you, he's not withholding you, he's protecting you. He's preserving the oil, he's cultivating something that will last. He's shielding you from platforms your maturity isn't ready to carry. He's teaching you how to stand without support. how to believe without evidence, how to press without praise. That's when you know you're building something real. When you can stay consistent without being seen, when you can keep sowing even though no one's clapping, when you can say, God, if you're the only one watching, that's enough for me. Because when the world does become your audience, you'll know who you've been performing for all along, and it won't be them, it'll be him. You won't be moved by their applause or discouraged by their silence. You'll be anchored, you'll be rooted, you'll be standing on something eternal. Because when God is your witness, you're not in this for hype, you're in it for heaven. You're not in it to be celebrated, you're in it to be sanctified. You're not in it you're in it to transform. And you'll be able to discern the difference between the spotlight and the assignment, between being seen and being sent, between popularity and purpose. Because the presence of people doesn't validate the presence of God. And the absence of people doesn't mean the absence of purpose. That's why some of your deepest breakthroughs won't be public. They'll happen when you're on your face, when you're walking away from what's easy, when you're standing in faith with nothing to show but a word from God and a yes in your spirit. God is not interested in building your platform at the expense of your soul. He's not trying to make you impressive. He's trying to make you whole. And he knows that if you can trust him to be your witness now, you won't be shaken when the crowd finally comes, because you've already been seen, you've already been known, you've already been affirmed, and you didn't have to compromise to get it. You didn't have to lose yourself to find it. You just had to believe that what God starts in private, he finishes in glory. So let him be your witness. Let him be your audience of one. Let him be the reason you show up, the reason you stay planted, the reason you keep building, keep healing, keep stretching, even when it looks like no one's watching. Because the truth is, he is. And when the curtain lifts, when the doors open, when the manifestation comes, you'll know this didn't start in the spotlight. It started in the secret place, in the silence, in the surrender, in the moments where it was just you and God. And that was more than enough.